So for this video, we're going to start with a spreadsheet where we have put in a macro. This macro depends upon the inputs in specific fields or specific cells on a specific worksheet. In this case, we've got a macro, which if we look at assign macro, is defined by this copy files macro. And it uses this named range here, the inputs table. And if we run that macro, it runs fine. But as soon as we start messing about with the structure of this worksheet, then immediately the macro is going to start to break. And just to show this, let's click on it now. We can see it's broken, okay? And the reason it's broken is because this destination path has been constructed incorrectly, and that's because we have gone and messed about with the structure of the worksheet. Now to fix this, we're going to apply something that I like to call Uber protection. And that's basically a combination of workbook protection and worksheet protection that is activated on the worksheet activate event and that is taken off on the worksheet deactivate event. If we look in the review tab, we can see right now this worksheet, it's got the workbook protection applied to it and it's got the worksheet level of protection applied to it. So the user cannot insert columns, they cannot insert rows, they cannot rename, delete or insert worksheets. They cannot change this command button and which macro it's assigned to. They cannot even change the name range that is being used by our macro. So this time when we click on copy all files, it just works. No problems whatsoever. And the user is going to find it very difficult to break our macro by messing about with the structure of the workbook. If, however, they did want to change some other cells that they are allowed to change, they can do, because as soon as we click out of that worksheet, the protection is taken off. And that's what I'm going to show you how to build in this video. So the first thing we want to do is to make sure that when we lock down our control worksheet, the users can still edit the input fields. We want the users to be able to change the source path, change the source file name, change the copy path, and change the copy file name. What we don't want is for the users to be able to change anything else about the control worksheet. How do we achieve that? Well, part of the protection that we're going to place on the control worksheet is a sheet protection level. If we go to the review tab, we can see we've got a protect sheet button. Essentially, we'll be applying that to this worksheet. Now, this applies to any cells on that worksheet that are locked. And when we say locked, what we mean is if we right click on a cell and go to the format cell, we can see a protection tab. And on the protection tab, we can see whether this cell is locked or not. For now, we're going to cancel. By default, all of the cells should be locked. So if we select all the cells on the worksheet and go to protection, we can see that they're all locked. Okay, so we're going to select this range of cells and then we're going to right click and we're going to say format cells and we're going to set protection to unlocked. Okay, now the effect is that when I click on protect sheet here, I'm not going to put in a password for now. If I were to change the file name in here, that's fine. It allows me to do it. If I try and do the same over here for one of the locked cells that's now been protected, we just use the F2 key to start editing that cell. And immediately I get a pop-up which says, this is a protected sheet. First, you need to unprotect the sheet before you make any changes. That's the behavior that we want. So for now, we're going to unprotect the sheet. As a second step, let's open up the Visual Basic Editor. We'll use Alt and F11. And we can see here we've got a module called copy files. And we've got a subroutine, which is literally just working through the input table. And for each row in the table, it's constructing a source file path and a destination file path. And it's copying the file from the source path to the destination path. There's nothing too complicated in this, and we're not really too bothered about this subroutine for now. It's just a subroutine that sits in a spreadsheet. we're going to create a new module. We're going to say insert module, and we're going to give that a name. Let's call it Uber Protect. Close that down. So we're going to first create a subroutine which allows us to lock down a given workbook and a given worksheet on that workbook. So we're going to use public sub Uber Protect, and we're going to use an input of a worksheet by val input worksheet as worksheet, and we're going to input a password. So by val input password as string. Okay, first thing we're going to do is protect the workbook. So this workbook dot protect, and we're going to use a password of input password, and we're going to say we want to protect the structure. Okay, next what we're going to do is protect the individual worksheet. So input worksheet dot protect, and we just need a password in this case. So password equals input password. And what I've done here as well is I've created a module called project level variables, and the only thing I've put in that module is a public constant called worksheet password, and I've made that module use option private module, which means that this is now a project level constant rather than a global constant. And that's so that we have one single place where our password is stored and we can refer to it in the rest of our code. Now, how do we actually go and program our worksheets to behave in the way we want them to? We go to our worksheet events defined in the control worksheet, and we use the activate and deactivate events to apply the workbook level protection and the worksheet level protection only to the control worksheet. Why do we do it this way? Well, the goal is so that we lock down our control worksheet, but we don't want to lock down the other worksheets in the workbook. However, when we are locking down our control worksheet, we have to use workbook level protection. So we have to apply this protection each time it's activated and take it off each time it's deactivated. That's why we use the events for the worksheet instead of the events for the workbook. Let's actually build that in now. If we go to the control worksheet and click on view code, we're going to select the object worksheet and we're going to select the activate event. Let's just get rid of that selection change event code. And under the worksheet activate event, we're going to say call Uber Protect with the worksheet is me, and the password is going to be worksheet password. Okay, very, very simple. And now when we go back to our workbook, we should get the exact behavior that we want from our Uber level of protection. We can see here when we go back to our workbook, once we activate the control worksheet, it applies both workbook level protection and worksheet level protection. What does this mean? Well, it means if we go to the tab for the control worksheet and right click, we can now see that the buttons for inserting, deleting, renaming, moving and copy, they've all been grayed out. Basically, the user cannot mess about with the structure of the workbook using this tab. So it cannot rename the tab, it cannot delete it, for example. In terms of the worksheet level protection, this also means that you cannot remove this command button to copy all files. You cannot change any cells that are locked. For example, if I just click the F2 key now, it would give me an error and say I need to unprotect the sheet first. It does mean that because we have unlocked our input cells, the user can change these as and when they want to. So we can change that from test to 2. Great, that's exactly what we want. The final bit of protection worth pointing out is we have defined a named range for this set of input cells. if we go to the formulas name manager, we can see now that because we've protected the workbook, this named range is now protected. Okay, user cannot go and delete it, they cannot edit it, they cannot change the range over which it's defined. In addition, the users cannot insert columns, they cannot delete columns, they cannot insert rows, they cannot delete rows. So basically our control worksheet is fully protected. The users will find it very difficult to go away and mess with the structure and to break our macro as a result. However, when they click out of this worksheet and they click onto sheet 2, all of that protection is taken off. So in sheet 2 they can do whatever they want, and that gives them the freedom to develop the rest of the workbook, at will, and to do whatever they want with that. So let's just give that copy all files macro a go. Let's just make sure that it does actually run. And once we've run that, we can take a look at the files in the folder. We can see it has actually copied the book1_test, the to-do_2, and in the example subfolder, it has actually again copied the files that we wanted it to. So the macro is working exactly as it should be, and the user will find it very difficult to break that macro.